The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched upward like the inside of a cathedral. Its walls lined with floating platforms where representatives from 100 different species watched and whispered and judged. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood alone at the center of it all. A single human woman facing the assembled might of civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia, before her ancestors had learned to make fire behind her. A holographic image of Earth rotated slowly in the air. That small blue marble that humanity called home, looking fragile and insignificant against the backdrop of an empire that spanned thousands of worlds. The Valori High Speaker towered above everyone else on her crystal throne, a body made of living gemstone that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows across the chamber walls. She had just finished reading the proposed treaty terms in a voice that rang like bells, each word carefully chosen to remind everyone present exactly where humans stood in the galactic hierarchy. Elena kept her face neutral as she listened, but inside her chest, her heart was pounding with a mixture of anger and disbelief at what she was hearing. Provisional associate status, the treaty said, which meant humanity would have no voting rights and no voice in any council decisions that affected their future. They would be confined to their single solar system with no territorial claims allowed beyond that tiny bubble of space they already occupied. All human technology would be shared with the council, but the council would share nothing in return because humans were deemed too primitive to handle advanced knowledge responsibly. And then there was the clause about cultural guidance, which meant that older species would supervise human development and correct any behaviors they found inappropriate. The Rithani delegate clicked his mandibles together, and what Elena had learned was their version of laughter, a sound like bones rattling in a box. He was an insectoid creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected her image back at her. 1,000 times over, we are being quite generous with your kind, he said in a voice that buzzed and hummed. And you should be grateful for the opportunity we are offering you today. The Valori themselves waited 3,000 years before they were granted full council membership, and they were far more advanced than you when they first made contact. Elena felt her jaw tighten, but she forced herself to remain calm and professional because she was representing all of humanity in this moment. I have a question about Section 14, she said, pulling up the relevant passage on her tablet, specifically the clause regarding military obligations. It states that humanity must provide soldiers for council peacekeeping operations while being denied any voice in where those soldiers are deployed or how they are used. The Mulodari ambassador rippled in his containment field, his gelatinous body shifting colors from blue to purple. As he prepared to speak, he was a being of living fluid, an ocean compressed into a vaguely humanoid shape. And when he spoke, his voice bubbled up from somewhere deep within his mass. Your species breeds quickly and dies easily, he said as though he were discussing the weather. And this makes you ideally suited for dangerous military operations. It is simply the most practical use of your particular talents, and you should take pride in serving the greater galactic community in this way. The chamber fell completely silent as Elena slowly closed her tablet and gathered the documents she had brought with her. She looked around at the assembled delegates, at the Valori with their crystalline arrogance, at the Rithani with their clicking contempt, at the Melodari with their casual cruelty. These were the rulers of the galaxy, the species that had decided among themselves how the universe would be ordered, and who would matter and who would not. And they had looked at humanity and seen nothing but cannon fodder, nothing but bodies to throw at their enemies. While they sat safe in their palaces among the stars, Elena began walking toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the chamber. Ambassador Vasquez, the High Speaker, called out, her voice sharp with surprise. You have not agreed to the terms we have presented. Elena paused at the doorway, but did not turn around, letting them see only her back, letting them understand that she was choosing to leave, "No," she said simply. "I have not agreed to your terms. Surely you understand what rejection means for your species." The High Speaker continued, and for the first time there was something other than arrogance in her voice. Continued isolation from the galactic community. No trade agreements, no protection from hostile powers like the hegemony. No access to the faster-than-light corridor routes that connect our worlds. Your people will be alone. Ambassador, truly alone in a universe full of dangers you cannot even imagine. Elena finally turned to face them, and something in her eyes made even the High Speaker fall silent. "We understand perfectly what you are offering and what you are threatening," Elena said, her voice steady and clear. "You are offering us the privilege of being your servants and your soldiers. And you are threatening us with the consequences of refusing. But here is what you do not understand about humanity." She took a step forward, and somehow in that moment she seemed larger than the chamber itself, larger than all the ancient powers arrayed against her. "We have spent our entire history fighting for our dignity, fighting against those who told us we were lesser, fighting to prove that we matter. We did not crawl out of the mud and reach for the stars just to bow down before the first aliens who demanded our submission. Humanity formally withdraws from these negotiations, effective immediately. We will find our own path among the stars. And we will do it on our own terms or not at all." She turned and walked through the doorway, disappearing into the corridor beyond without. Looking back, the council chamber erupted in noise as delegates shouted and argued, and demanded to know what had just happened. The Rithani delegate waved one of his forearms dismissively, and made that rattling laugh again. "Let them go," he said with contempt dripping from every word. "They will come crawling back within a decade, begging for whatever scraps we choose to give them. They are primitives who have no idea what they are facing out there in the darkness between stars." The High Speaker said nothing, but something troubled her as she watched the door where the human ambassador had disappeared. There had been something in that woman's eyes, something fierce and unbreakable, something that reminded her of stories from her people's ancient past. But surely that was foolish. Surely humans were exactly what the council believed them to be. Surely they would return. Humbled and desperate, within a few short years the council moved on to other business. And humanity was forgotten. It was a mistake that would haunt them all. 50 years passed in the way that time always passes for a mortal species, slowly and without much notice. Like sand trickling through an hourglass the size of a mountain, the Galactic Council continued its ancient work of managing the affairs of 1,000 worlds, mediating disputes between species that had hated each other for longer than humanity had existed. Wars flared up and were extinguished. Trade routes were negotiated and renegotiated, and the great machine of galactic civilization ground onward as it always had. And in all that time, no one thought much about the humans. They had sealed their borders shortly after. Ambassador Vasquez walked out of the council chamber, refusing all communication attempts and turning away any ships that approached their territory. A few council members suggested sending a diplomatic mission to check on them, but the idea was always dismissed as a waste of resources. Let the primitives sulk in their corner of space. The Rithani delegate said, whenever the topic came up, "They will come to us when they are ready to be reasonable." But strange reports began filtering in from the edges of human space. Whispers and rumors that made their way through trading posts and smuggler dens. A Melodari trading vessel had been caught in a spatial anomaly near the human exclusion zone, their engines failing and their life support failing with them. They had sent out distress calls knowing that no help would come, preparing themselves for the slow death that awaited them in the cold darkness between stars. But help had come. A ship of unknown design had appeared out of nowhere, its configuration unlike anything in the council databases, its technology decades ahead of council standard by the captain's estimation. Humans had pulled them from certain death with a tractor beam that should not have existed, repaired their vessel with tools that should not have been possible, and sent them on their way with supplies and star charts. They had asked for nothing in return. Not payment, not information, not even gratitude. The captain submitted his report to the council, but it was filed away and forgotten because everyone knew it had to be exaggerated or mistaken. The humans could not possibly have technology superior to the council because they had no access to the knowledge networks that made such advancement possible. Other reports followed, each one stranger than the last, each one suggesting that something unprecedented was happening in human space. A Valori science vessel detected energy signatures from within the exclusion zone that matched no known power source. Readings that suggested the humans had somehow developed a new form of reactor technology. A Rethani scout ship caught a glimpse of a human vessel at the edge of their territory. A ship so fast that it vanished before their sensors could get a proper lock on it. Merchants trading at the border stations spoke of human goods appearing on the black market, medical devices and computing systems and materials that outperformed anything the council could produce. But still the council did not pay attention, because they were busy with more pressing matters. The hegemony was moving. The insectoid empire had lurked at the edge of the galaxy for centuries, probing council defenses, testing their resolve, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now that moment had come. Their latest offensive was different from anything they had attempted before. Organized and overwhelming and terrifyingly efficient. 3 outer systems fell within a month, their defenses crumbling before fleets that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere. The council's combined fleet was stretched thin, barely holding the line at a dozen different points, while the hegemony pressed forward with relentless pressure. Emergency sessions were called. Resources were mobilized. Species that had not cooperated in centuries were forced to work together against a common threat. But it was not enough. We need more ships, the Valori High Speaker declared at the latest emergency meeting, her crystal form flickering with stress as she faced the assembled delegates. We need more soldiers, more weapons, more everything if we are to survive what is coming. The Melodari delegate rippled with fear, his gelatinous body turning a sickly yellow color that indicated deep distress. Our shipyards are working at maximum capacity, and we cannot produce vessels fast enough to replace our losses. The hegemony breeds soldiers faster than we can train them, and their hive mind coordination gives them advantages we cannot match. The chamber fell into despair as delegate after delegate reported the same grim news from their sectors. A litany of defeats and retreats and desperate last stands. Then the new Rethani delegate, grandson of the one who had laughed at Ambassador Vasquez 50 years ago, rose to speak. There is one possibility we have not considered, he said carefully, knowing that his words would not be welcome. We could contact the humans. Silence fell over the chamber like a funeral shroud. The humans are isolationists. Someone objected. They have refused all our communication attempts for 5 decades. They hate us. Another delegate added. And why would they not, after the way we treated them at the original negotiations? They are probably dead by now. A third voice called out, wiped out by some cosmic disaster or destroyed by their own primitive technology. But the High Speaker raised her crystalline hand for silence, and something in her ancient eyes suggested she was remembering something from long ago. Perhaps we should try harder to reach them, she said slowly, because at this point we have very little left to lose. Send a mission to human space, our best diplomat with our most advanced ship. Find out what has become of them, and if they still exist, ask them if they are willing to help us. And if they refuse, the Rethani delegate asked quietly. The High Speaker's crystal form dimmed with something that might have been shame. Then we will face the consequences of choices made 50 years ago by those who thought they knew everything, sometimes the universe. As a way of teaching humility to those who need it most, the mission was approved. And Ambassador Kaveth of the Melodari was chosen to make first contact with a species that the Council had dismissed and forgotten and wronged. He prepared for his journey not knowing that everything he believed about humans was about to be shattered, and that the universe was much stranger and more wonderful than the Council had ever imagined. Ambassador Kaveth crossed the border into human space, expecting to find a civilization on the edge of collapse, a desperate people clinging to survival in their single solar system. He had brought supplies and medicine and technology to offer as gifts, thinking that surely the humans would be grateful for any help after 50 years of isolation. What he found instead made him question everything he had ever believed about the universe. His ship had barely crossed the exclusion zone boundary when 3 vessels appeared around him, surrounding his craft with a precision that spoke of long practice and perfect coordination. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, sleek and angular and unlike anything in the Council databases, their hulls gleaming with materials that his sensors could not identify. Melodari vessel. A calm human voice said over his communication system, "You are entering human space without authorization. State your purpose and prepare to be escorted to processing." Kaveth felt his gelatinous body ripple with shock, but he managed to keep his voice steady as he responded, "I am Ambassador Kaveth of the Melodari people, sent by the Galactic Council to request a meeting with human leadership. We come in peace and with urgent matters to discuss." There was a long pause, and then the voice returned with something that might have been amusement. "Ambassador Kaveth, you are the first official Council representative to enter our space in 50 years. You will be escorted to New Geneva Station, where someone will meet with you. Please follow the navigation beacon and do not deviate from the assigned course." Kaveth followed the beacon, and as he traveled deeper into human space, his instruments showed him things that should not have been possible. 17 star systems, not one, each of them connected by a network of faster-than-light corridors that the humans had somehow built themselves hundreds of habitable worlds and moons, terraformed and colonized and thriving with human life. Orbital stations that dwarfed anything the Council had ever constructed. Massive rings around planets where millions of humans lived and worked. And ships, countless ships of every size and configuration, moving through space with an efficiency that made his own vessel look like a primitive relic from ancient history. By the time he reached New Geneva Station, Kaveth's understanding of humans had been completely destroyed and rebuilt from the foundations. Up the station itself was a masterpiece of engineering. A vast wheel spinning slowly in orbit around a blue-green world that reminded him of the images he had seen of old Earth. He was guided to a docking bay where human officials in crisp uniforms welcomed him with polite professionalism. They led him through corridors that hummed with energy and technology, past windows that showed views of the planet below and the stars beyond. Finally, he was brought to a conference room where a tall human man waited for him, a man with gray hair at his temples and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of difficult decisions. "Ambassador Kaveth," the man said, extending his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I am Admiral James Okonkwo of the Human Defense Force. We have been expecting someone from the Council, though perhaps not so soon." Kaveth took the offered hand, his fluid body forming temporary fingers to match the gesture. "Admiral Okonkwo, I must confess that what I have seen today has left me speechless. How is any of this possible? How did you accomplish all of this in just 50 years? You had no access to Council technology, no FDL corridor rights, no knowledge networks to draw upon." Okonkwo smiled, but there was something sad in the expression, something old and tired, despite the strength in his bearing. "We built our own," he said simply. "Every ship, every station, every corridor you pass through on your way here. When you are told that you are inferior, Ambassador, you have 2 choices. You can believe it and accept your place at the bottom of the hierarchy, or you can prove it wrong." He gestured to the window. where human ships moved in graceful formations against the backdrop of stars. We chose the latter, and we worked harder than we had ever worked before. Every scientist, every engineer, every dreamer in human space dedicated themselves to a single goal. We would stand on our own feet, or we would fall, but we would never kneel. Kaveth felt something like shame rippling through his body as he listened, remembering the words that his own people had spoken about humans 50 years ago. "Admiral, I am here because the hegemony is advancing against Council space. Our fleets are being pushed back on every front, and we faced a very real possibility of complete defeat. The Council needs help, and you are the only ones we have not yet asked." Okonkwo nodded slowly, his expression unchanging, as though this news was not news at all. "We know about the hegemony's movements," he said. "We have been monitoring everything that happens in the galaxy since we closed our borders. We saw their buildup beginning 2 years ago, and we tried to warn the Council through back channels and intermediaries." Kaveth's body turned a dark shade of purple with shock. "You tried to warn us, but we received no such warnings. Your intelligence services dismissed our warnings as human hysteria," Okonkwo said with a bitter edge to his voice. "They assumed that primitives like us could not possibly have accurate information about galactic affairs. By the time they realized we were right, 3 systems had already fallen." The ambassador felt his form sag with the weight of accumulated mistakes. 50 years of arrogance and dismissal coming home to roost. "Will you help us?" he asked, knowing that he had no right to ask, knowing that the humans had every reason to refuse. "Please, Admiral. Billions of lives hang in the balance." Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as though he was looking at something only he could see. 50 years ago, your council offered us the privilege of dying for species that considered us animals. You wanted our bodies to throw at your enemies while treating us as less than nothing. Now you come to us asking us to die for you anyway, when you have done nothing to earn that sacrifice." He leaned forward, and his eyes were hard as stone. "Tell me, Ambassador, why should we help the Council that rejected and insulted us? Why should we spend human lives defending those who saw us as expendable?" Kaveth had no answer, because there was no answer that could undo 50 years of contempt. All he could do was tell the truth. "Because you are better than we were," he said quietly. "Because the humans I have seen today are not the primitives we imagined. You are a great people, Admiral, perhaps greater than any species the Council has ever known. And great peoples do great things not because others deserve it, but because it is right." Okonkwo stared at him for a long moment, and then slowly a real smile crossed his face. "That was well said, Ambassador, and it was the right answer. Return to your council and tell them that humanity will consider their request. But if we choose to help, it will be on our terms, not theirs. And our terms will be very different from what they offered us 50 years ago." The council chamber was more crowded than it had been in 1,000 years, with every species and every delegate and every observer packed into the great hall to witness what was about to happen. Floating cameras broadcast the proceedings to billions of viewers across the galaxy. Beings of every kind watching from their homes and workplaces as history unfolded before them. The holographic projector at the center of the chamber glowed to life, and Admiral James Okonkwo's face appeared. Broadcasting from somewhere deep in human space, he looked calm and composed. A man who held the fate of civilizations in his hands and knew exactly how much that weight demanded of him. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice carrying through the chamber with perfect clarity. "Humanity has considered your request for assistance against the hegemony invasion. After much debate among our people, we have reached a decision." The chamber held its breath. Thousands of beings waiting for the words that would determine whether they lived or died. "Humanity will assist in the defense against the hegemony." Okonkwo announced. A wave of relief swept through the assembly, delegates embracing each other and crying out with joy. believing that they were saved under the following conditions, the Admiral continued. And the celebration died as quickly as it had begun. The Valori High Speaker leaned forward on her crystal throne, her ancient eyes fixed on the human's image. "Name your terms, Admiral," she said, "and we will consider them." Okonkwo's expression did not change, but something in his voice hardened like steel being forged in fire. First, full council membership for humanity. Immediate and unconditional. No provisional status, no waiting periods. No cultural guidance from species that consider themselves our superiors. One vote, equal to any other member species, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, but Okonkwo pressed forward without pause. Second, a formal and public apology from this council for the terms offered during the original negotiations 50 years ago. The specific language used at that time, referring to human breeding and human lives as expendable resources, will be acknowledged and officially repudiated. This apology will be broadcast to every world in council space so that all may know what was said and that it was wrong. The Molodari delegate turned a shade of embarrassed purple, remembering that it was his predecessor who had spoken those terrible words. Third, all species currently designated as pre-council or provisional will be offered the same full membership that we are demanding for ourselves. The practice of treating younger species as lesser beings ends today, not tomorrow, not next year, but today. Every civilization that reaches for the stars deserves the same dignity and respect that the oldest among you enjoy. This demand sent shockwaves through the assembly, because it would overturn hierarchies that had existed for millions of years. Fourth, and finally, when this war is over, humanity will share all technological advances we have developed during our 50 years of isolation. We will share them freely, without cost or condition, with every species in the galaxy. This includes the medical breakthroughs that have extended human lifespan to 300 years. Gasps of pure shock echoed through the chamber, because no one had imagined that the humans had achieved something so extraordinary. 300 years of life, given freely to everyone, would transform galactic civilization in ways no one could predict. The Rithani delegate shot to his feet, his mandibles clicking with outrage. "This is extortion," he shouted. "You are holding us hostage in our moment of greatest need. You are demanding that we tear down everything our civilization has built just to save ourselves." Okonkwo's image remained perfectly calm, unmoved by the outburst. "You are free to refuse our terms," he said quietly. "We will not force anyone to accept our help. But understand this, we did not create this crisis. You did. For 50 years you ignored us, you dismissed us. You assumed that we would fade away into nothing. And now that you need us, you expect us to come running without asking anything in return. That is not how dignity works. And that is not the kind of people we have become." The High Speaker raised her crystalline hand for silence, and something in her bearing spoke of deep weariness and hard-earned wisdom. "He's right," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of ancient mistakes. "This is not extortion. This is what happens when you underestimate someone for 50 years and then need them to save your life. This is what consequences look like when they finally catch up with you." She turned to face the assembly, her form catching the light and scattering it across the chamber like tears made of rainbows. "We were wrong," she said simply. "We were arrogant and cruel, and we treated a young species with contempt because we could not imagine that they might become our equals. And now we must face the price of our arrogance, not as a punishment but as a lesson. The humans are offering us a chance to be better than we were, to build a galaxy where no species is considered lesser. I say we take that chance, not because we have no choice, but because it is the right thing to do." The debate that followed was fierce but brief, because everyone in that chamber knew the truth. They needed the humans. And the humans were offering more than just military aid. They were offering redemption. The vote was unanimous. Every species and every delegate agreeing to accept humanity's terms. When the results were announced, Admiral Okonkwo nodded once, his expression softening just slightly. The human fleet will depart for the threshold within 24 hours. He said, "Tell your people to hold the line until we arrive, and tell them that help is coming. Not as masters to servants, but as partners to partners. That is what the humans are fighting for. And that is what we will win." The transmission ended, and the chamber erupted in a chaos of emotions. Hope and fear and shame and gratitude all mixed together, but beneath it all was something new. Something that had not existed before, the first fragile shoots of a new relationship between humanity and the galaxy, a relationship built not on hierarchy and contempt, but on equality and mutual respect. The question now was whether that relationship would survive the fire that was coming. The threshold was a natural choke point in space, a narrow corridor between two massive nebulae that served as the last gateway to the core Council worlds. For millennia, it had been a place of commerce and diplomacy, a crossroads where species met and traded and built the foundations of galactic civilization. Now it was about to become a battlefield. The hegemony's main fleet had gathered on the far side of the passage. Over 10,000 ships bristling with weapons and filled with soldiers bred for nothing but war. Their insectoid commanders watched with compound eyes that showed no emotion, their hive mind linking them together into a single vast intelligence focused on conquest. On the Council side of the threshold, barely 4,000 ships waited in defensive formation, their hulls scarred from months of retreat and their crews exhausted from endless fighting. Admiral Dex of the Valerie stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the enemy fleet on his tactical display and knowing that the numbers simply did not work, even with every ship they had. Even fighting with desperate courage, they could not hold against those odds. His communications officer turned to him with fear in her crystalline eyes. "Admiral, the hegemony fleet is beginning to advance. They will reach the threshold in 4 hours. Dex nodded slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like a physical force. He had sent messages to his family, said his goodbyes, made peace with what was coming. Today would be a good day to die in defense of everything he loved. Signal all ships to prepare for engagement," he ordered, "and tell them it has been an honor." But before he could say anything more, his sensor officer let out a sound of pure shock. "Admiral, new contacts dropping out of faster-than-light behind us. 600 ships of unknown configuration." Dex spun toward the display, his crystal form flashing with alarm. Certain that the hegemony had somehow flanked them, what he saw instead made him stop breathing. The ships were human. They moved into formation around the Council fleet with a grace that seemed almost choreographed, their sleek hulls gleaming with technology that made even the newest Council vessels look primitive. A communication request came through, and when Dex accepted it, he found himself looking at a human woman in a military uniform, her face calm and confident. "Admiral Dex, I am Fleet Commander Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Force. We apologize for the delay." The threshold corridors were congested. Dex stared at her, his mind struggling to process what was happening. 600 ships, he said slowly. "You brought only 600 ships against 10,000. Commander Chun smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Dex's fear begin to fade. "Trust us, Admiral. 600 will be enough. Your fleet should hold position and provide support fire. When we engage, leave the hegemony to us." The human ships began to move forward, accelerating toward the threshold with impossible speed. And Dex noticed something strange about their formations. They were too precise, too perfect, moving in patterns that no organic crew could possibly coordinate. "How are they doing that?" his sensor officer whispered. No living beings can react that fast. Then the first human ships reached the hegemony fleet, and the battle began. What followed was unlike anything Admiral Vex had ever witnessed in his 300 years of military service. The human vessels moved in ways that should have been impossible, accelerating and stopping and changing direction in maneuvers that would have killed any biological crew. They struck at the hegemony ships with surgical precision, their weapons targeting engines and weapon systems and command centers with perfect accuracy. And they did not die, where Council ships would have been destroyed in seconds under such intense fire. The human vessels twisted and dodged, their shields absorbing hits that should have been fatal. They did not fight like individual ships at all. They fought like a single organism with 600 bodies, each one knowing exactly what the others were doing. The hegemony commanders tried to adapt, tried to use their numerical advantage to overwhelm the human fleet. But nothing they did seemed to work. Every formation they created was countered before they could execute it. Every trap they set was avoided. Every weakness they tried to exploit was protected. 2 hours into the battle, the truth became clear to everyone watching. The human ships were not crewed at all. They were controlled by artificial intelligences of unprecedented sophistication. Minds that could think and react faster than any biological being can imagine. The human operators were somewhere far away, directing the battle through remote links, pushing their vessels to limits that would have been suicidal for any living crew. The hegemony fleet began to break. Ships that had never known retreat turned and ran, their hive mind commanders overwhelmed by an enemy that thought faster than they did. The human vessels pursued them, but did not destroy them, disabling engines and weapons and leaving the crippled ships drifting in space. When the hegemony's supreme commander finally understood that victory was impossible, he ordered a full retreat, and the human fleet let them go. Commander Chun's voice broadcast on all frequencies, reaching every ship on both sides of the battle. "This is a message for the hegemony high command," she said, her tone firm but not cruel. "Your fleet will withdraw to pre-war borders and remain there. Any further aggression against Council space will be met with the full force of humanity's defense capabilities. We do not seek your destruction, we seek peace, but we will not tolerate conquest, and we will defend those who cannot defend themselves. This is your one warning." The Battle of the Threshold lasted 6 hours from first contact to final retreat. Humanity lost 11 ships, all of them unmanned, their artificial minds preserved in backup systems. The hegemony lost over 2,000 vessels, most of them disabled rather than destroyed, their crews alive to carry the message home. It was the most one-sided victory in the history of galactic warfare. Months later, at the signing of the Threshold Accords that officially ended the war, the Valori High Speaker approached the human delegation. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was there, the same woman who had walked out of the council chamber 50 years before. The medical breakthroughs had been real, and she looked barely older than she had on that long ago day. "We made a terrible mistake," the High Speaker said, her crystal form dimmed with genuine humility. 50 years ago, we looked at your species and saw only primitives, only bodies to be used and discarded. We offered you scraps and called it generosity. I do not expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what we did." Elena smiled, and there was no bitterness in it, only the wisdom that comes from struggle and triumph. "You taught us something valuable," she said. "You taught us that we could only rely on ourselves, that if we wanted respect, we had to earn it through our own efforts. That lesson drove us harder than any treaty ever could have. In a strange way, your contempt made us stronger than your friendship ever would have." The High Speaker considered this for a moment, then asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "You could have demanded far more than you did. You could have made the Council subordinate to humanity, with your technology and your ships and your artificial minds. You could have ruled the galaxy. Why did you not take that power when it was offered to you? Elena extended her hand in the human gesture of friendship. The same gesture that had meant nothing 50 years ago, because we remember what it felt like to be treated as lesser. She said simply, "We have no interest in repeating your mistakes. We came here not to replace you as rulers of this council, but to make sure there are no rulers at all. Only partners, only equals. Only friends working together toward a future that benefits everyone." The High Speaker looked at the offered hand, understanding what it represented. It was not just friendship, it was a new beginning. A chance to build something better than what had come before. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took it a century later. Historians would call the Threshold Accords the beginning of a new galactic era. The old hierarchies crumbled away, replaced by a true federation where every species had an equal voice. Technology was shared freely, lifting all civilizations together toward heights that none could have reached alone. And when young species made first contact with the Federation, they were greeted not with arrogance, but with open arms. "You belong here." The welcome always began, "Just as you are, just as you will become. We are glad you found us, and we cannot wait to see what you will teach us." It was, everyone agreed, a very human way of doing things.